Hey guys, welcome to Real Life Overrated, and today we're gonna see how to translate a Next.js app with an app router using a next-intl library, and I'll try to showcase some of the common usages as well as some of the common problems that you might encounter while using this library. So for our example, we will be using this small Next.js project over here, which consists only of an index page that contains a link to a blog page. As for the code, the index page consists only of these three sections: a title, a dynamic string, and a link that we will be translating later on. And the blog page has only some placeholder text. We also have a simple layout component that has a navbar, which I borrowed from one of the Next.js examples. However, the most important thing over here are just these two links that are in the navbar. So first, let's install the library. And for the setup, I will be using this documentation, which is really well done, and I suggest you do the same. And the first thing that the documentation tells us is that we have to prepare our app structure. So first we have to create a messages folder in the root folder. So let's do that. And the messages folder will contain JSONs with our translations. So English will be the default. And for our second language, I will be using Czech. So the other file will be called cs.json. Then we have to make sure that we have this next.config.mjs file in the root folder. So we do have that. I think it's a file that's provided by default by the new Next.js projects. Then we have to make sure that we have this i18n.ts file in the source folder. And by the way, you do not have to use the source folder. You can just do the setup in the root folder if you do not have this source folder, but I prefer to use it. Next, we have to have this middleware.ts file in the source folder. And finally, we need to make sure that we have this locale subfolder and move all the layouts and pages over there. So we will move our blog there, and we will also move our layout there and our page there. And since our layout is actually importing the globals.css, we will move it there as well. So let's create some default JSON in our en.json file, just so we have something. Next, we have to create this next-intl plugin provider and wrap our next config with it. So my config is empty, but if you are already using some kind of provider, you can just nest it and it's completely fine. Next, we have to create this configuration object. And what this object does is, if the locales are matching, it does provide the request with our imported translations on our server side. So let's just change the German for Czech language. Next, we have to create our middleware, which will handle redirects and rewrites for the matching locales and matching paths. And again, let's change the German language for Czech. So this will make sure that these path names are actually translated. Finally, we have to provide our client components with our translations, and this is done with the help of next-intl client provider. And we can just wrap the content of the main with the provider. That's it for the setup. Let's make sure that everything works. And apparently we have a bug in our JSON file, so let's check it. Yeah, it's not a valid JSON. Okay, so it seems that everything is working correctly for now. So I can go to an English endpoint, I can go to Czech endpoint, and if I go to root, it should redirect me to my default language, which is English. It turns out the default is Czech, so let's change that. One thing that we forgot is to provide our locale dynamically to our HTML. So let's do that. However, I believe that the fact that the Czech language is the default choice is correct. That is because the language is actually stored in the cookie. So it's dependent on which language have we visited last. So if I visit last Czech, the default will be Czech. If I visit English, the default will be English. And if I remove the cookie and visit the root, the default should be English. And let's start with translation. So to start translation, all we have to do is to use a use translations hook provided by the next-intl library. And as an argument, you have to put a namespace, which is the key in the JSON. So as of right now, we actually have only one namespace, and that is index. I usually name my namespaces based on the components that I actually import them in. So in this case, it would be home. So let's rename it. And now we can just export the text as an appropriate key in the namespace. So let's say we could leave the title and call the function with the appropriate key. Oops, we have a typo. And of course, we need to actually export the text to the Czech JSON as well. So let's do that. And let's try that everything works. So if I go to English, I see my portfolio. If I go to Czech, I see the Czech translation. So everything seems to be working for now. Now let's say I want to translate something dynamic, something that contains a variable, which could be this language over here. For that, I will need to use another hook. And make this string into a template literal. Let's first make sure it works. So I'm watching it in CS language, and now it's in English language, so it works. And now I need to extract the string with the variable. It could be, for example, dynamic text. This is not a template literal, so let's just remove the $sign. Add a comma. And I can supply the variable in another parameter, which is an object like this. Which is basically the same as just writing the locale like this. Seems that it is working. Now in order to translate a text containing JSX, you have to use a special reach function. But first we have to extract the text, so let's do that. Let's name this entry block link. And let's fix the formatting. And you can just use a custom tag in the text and remove everything that is inside of the tag. Like this. and you just call the appropriate key, which is a blog link. And as a second parameter, you use the name of the tag that you used in the extracted string. So in this case, a link, which will return you a content of the link. And you can supply it like this and put the content inside. And currently it actually returns an error, which is caused by the fact that this link expects a React node. But right now we have a function body, of course, so let's fix that. And remove the semicolon and it should be good. Let's check it works. Yes. Now one problem that we have right now is that if we switch to a Czech language, we will see that there is no translation being provided, and that is because the text currently is not translated. The Czech JSON is empty. Luckily, there is a way how to provide a default translation. So let's do that. So when providing default translations, you need to know whether you are providing the translations to server component or to a client component, because the server translations are provided in iatn.ts and the client translations are provided in the layout. So in our case, we're talking about server components, because if we log something out, it actually doesn't get logged in a client, it gets logged in the server, like this. So in our case, we will be providing default translations in the iatn.ts. And for the default translations, you need to install a library. So let's do that. The library is called deepmerge. And once the library is installed, all you have to do is to import your local messages. So let's do that. And your default messages. Which in our case will be English messages. And then you merge them. And the default messages have to come first. And we can pass our messages like this, which is the same as this. Now the way the deep merge function works is there are no duplicities, it just merges the two JSONs. So English translations are provided only in cases where the Czech translations are missing here. Let's try that it works. We need to run the server. And we can see that even on our Czech language endpoint, the English messages are actually provided when Czech messages are missing. Now this leaves us with one more problem, and that is that our links actually won't work. And that is because the links actually point to unlocalized endpoint, but we need it to point to cs/blog or en/blog. So for that we need to create our own custom navigation with help of next-intl. So let's do that. And we will place it in the source folder. So first let's define the locales. And now we need to import a special object from next-intl library called create shared path names navigation. And we will export our custom link, redirect, use path name, and use router components from create shared path names navigation, which takes as a parameter an object with locales. And from now on, when we will need to redirect to a translated endpoint, we will need to import link or redirect or use router from this component. So let's go back to page.tsx. Instead of importing the link from next.link, let's actually import it from our navigation. And let's see that it works. Yes, as you can see, it works. And now let's try to create our own custom locale switcher, because this is something that didn't work for me based on the documentation and that I struggled with a little bit. So let's do that. Let's create new component and export it. And it will be a select component. With two options. And CS. And let's import it into navbar, for example. See how it looks. Okay, not very pretty. Let's give it some styling. This is a little bit better. And let's give it a label. Like this. Now we also need to give it a default value, and the default value has to be the locale that we currently have selected. So let's do that. And we can get the current locale from use locale hook. Import it from next-intl. Let's check it works. So on CS is CS and on ENA it's EN. But right now it doesn't do anything, of course, so let's change that. Let's create a change handler. It will take event, which will be change event. And we need to import router. And let's replace the locale on change. Let's use template literal. Like this. And let's try it works. Ah, we have a bug. Oh yeah, we're missing the arrow function here. And of course, for the use router, this needs to be a client component. Okay, nothing is happening. Let's see why. Oh yeah, the change handler is not assigned to the onChange. And right now it's actually working correctly. So one problem that I actually encountered with this library is that if you want to translate, for example, the navbar and the text over here, there is actually no nice way how to translate a text outside of a React component, because the only way to get the translation is to use the use translations hook. And that of course is only usable in a React component. So in order to translate items like these, you have to move them to a React component, which might be sometimes inconvenient if you, for example, are relying heavily on some helper functions that you share across the components or something like that. You will probably have to rethink the way how you structure your application or your components. Besides that, it's a really cool and really easy to use library. I hope this video has been useful for you, and see you in the next video.